Welcome to episode 157 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is Federal Analyst Anshel Sag. Let's get started with my first topic. And this was pretty dramatic news. So very suddenly this week, Tareq Amin at Rakuten announced his resignation for personal reasons or family reasons. And this was pretty abrupt. I mean, he's been an industry icon in driving disaggregated infrastructure, in particular vRAN. He was leading Rakuten Symphony as well. And so it got me thinking, is there trouble in paradise? And from my perspective, I did dig into this a little bit further. And it's clear that Symphony's revenues have been flat to declining, which indicates that they're not adding any new business. And I pointed this out as a concern, a mobile network operator taking its learnings from vRAN and then spinning a business unit out of that to help other operators. I mean, this is a very highly competitive market and environment. So clearly, I'm just going to kind of read between the lines here, but, Symphony, the financial performance was probably not meeting expectation. And when you look at the broader Rakuten mobility business, it's also a tad off. And so from my perspective, this was likely, Rakuten's approach to sort of reset things with Tareq's departure. But I spent a lot of time with Tareq. He's an innovator. He had some very unconventional ideas with Symphony, like, providing, RIP functionality at no charge. But at the end of the day, I've talked about this. I mean, Open RAN was really going to be a greenfield consideration for 5G because all of the mobile network operators really locked their RAN plans many, many years ago, dating all the way back to 2017 and 2018. But what's your take on all this?
I agree. It was fairly sudden. I personally don't love the typical corporate family
Excuse.
reasons or personal reasons thing. Like I get people having those things, but I feel like that's overused in a lot of scenarios. But if there is some family issue, I really hope that it is resolved.
Yeah,
And
for
everything's
sure.
okay. But it's been used so many times for non-family issues that I just don't really trust it as a reason anymore. And I'm more inclined to agree with most of what you've said. I really think that ORAN does have a lot of potential. And I think a lot of that potential lies in private networks. And I think the problem is that private networks are taking longer to deploy than I think
Yeah.
anyone would have liked to see. And I think that's really just a consequence of the fact that these are larger enterprises that are deploying ORAN, and these things will take time to integrate. And they have to go through a POC phase, and we're coming out of that POC phase. But to get those things from POC to actual deployment is still fairly difficult. And they're fairly small deployments if they're out of the POC phase. So I just think this is a slow roll thing. And when it comes to companies that are publicly listed and have quarterly earnings, that just doesn't bode well. I think I'm a huge proponent of running companies privately, especially when you're in a new industry. And the burden of public shareholders not understanding how long these things will take to actually make a meaningful impact. Somehow Amazon managed to convince their investors of that fact, but most companies are unable to let investors be patient because they're not. And that's really what I think this is a component of. Is this might be a temporary plateau, but they may still not realize the full potential for another 3 to 5 years. So because of that, I think he may have been prematurely removed, but that's just the way things are, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the scrutiny on corporate America, especially for public companies and to deliver on earnings and profitability and that sort of thing is very intense. I mean, you've seen Dell over the years go public, private, public, and one of the big concerns Michael Dell stated all along was, guidance, providing that guidance to Wall Street, because we're not financial analysts, we're tech analysts, but some of these financial buy side analysts can be pretty brutal, and some of them have a lot of influence and can affect stock valuations. But hey, I wish Tareq all the best. I do hope if there are family issues there that he works through those. And this isn't the last that we've heard from him. I mean, he's an icon in the industry. Guy just oozes personality and charisma, and he's a visionary. And so this isn't the last, I think, that we've heard from Tareq. But let's move to your first topic. This is big news. This is something that you and I have been, talking about behind the scenes. But Dish and Echostar are finally coming together in an all-stock deal, and you want to talk about that. And I've got some perspective here too, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it brief because I want to make sure the podcast doesn't run too long. But
Yeah.
we talked about this a month ago.
Yeah.
We were right. It looks like this is a $6 billion company together, which is sad because their revenues are much higher than that. So the company's definitely valuation has come down quite a bit. The thing is, Echostar does have $1.7 billion in cash, which I think Dish wants to get access to. And this will be a reunification of the two arms of Charlie Ergen's empire. So this is just one of those things that was probably going to be inevitable because the Charlie Ergen owns 60% of Echostar already. And Echostar's market value was only $2 billion, while Dish's was $4 billion. So there is some value being lost there. But I think really what this is about potentially making more resources available to Dish, and also potentially more spectrum. I also think to a certain degree there will be some unification of satellite and cellular down the road. So this might be a little bit of a visionary thing, but I think a lot of people are very, suspicious of whether or not this will be successful, considering how hard Dish has fallen in trying to deploy its 5G network and how it's struggling to maintain customers. I think I saw they lost another 100,000 customers recently. I didn't put that as a news item, but I can wind that into here. I've been hearing lots of grumblings that things are really not good. We have been reporting constantly that lots of executive departures, and they will lose. Dish will lose its CEO. There's a potential. There was rumors that maybe Tareq might come in and help run the company, but I'm not sure he has the energy to try and run two new 5G networks, one after another. But I'd love to hear what your take is.
Yeah, so I'll be really brief. So Charlie and I believe the Echostar executive were on CNBC recently, and it was a little awkward. I mean, they were really getting grilled, and the big question was, where are they going to find the capex to invest in making this a reality? You're spot on. I mean, one of the points that Charlie pointed to was in combining with Echostar, it gives them a very unique footprint, combining satellite as well. And he sort of spoke to the fact that they're the only operator that has both sort of terrestrial and satellite coming together. But time will tell with execution, and Dish's execution has been less than stellar. And I think to the point that you made too, there's been a reshuffling of management, just like we've seen recently with Rakuten. And so there is some concern there, and there's concern that Charlie's had the spectrum. He's had been sitting on spectrum for years. He's been accused of spectrum squatting and subject to potential fines if he doesn't deploy that spectrum. So they need to focus on the fundamentals. They need to deploy the spectrum that they have, and maybe not focused on the satellite part of it. But man, it will be interesting to see how this all winds out. But let's move to my second topic this week, and I want to talk about Intel and Samsung. And they announced a recent vRAN collaboration. Now, both companies have been working together for quite some time in the vRAN space. Samsung is arguably a leader with respect to vRAN, really leaning into it. And so the nature of the collaboration is that Samsung's going to integrate its vRAN 3.0 software with fourth generation Intel Xeon scalable processors. And what this is designed to do is improve capacity. So basically, with this combination, with the same number of servers, you'll be able to support more cell sites, and so that's a great thing. vRAN is the advantage of vRAN is being able to virtualize that radio access network infrastructure, get more out of the physical layer of hardware and equipment out there. So this is all great. And, it was a learning for me. I didn't realize that Samsung and Intel had been working with each other dating all the way back to 2017. So I think this is a good thing. We talked just real briefly about Open RAN with Tareq. Virtual RAN is, it's not to be confused with Open RAN, but it's another, arrow in the quiver for operators that are wanting to, kind of mitigate, their CapEx and improve their OpEx position. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Samsung and Intel do go way back. I believe Intel is also key in Samsung's core deployments. So there's obviously a relationship that already exists there. And obviously we know Samsung has their own semiconductor business as well. So I really think it's just kind of, mixing and matching where Samsung has strengths and weaknesses and where they think Intel is a good application. And also, a lot of people forget, but sometimes the operators have influence on what these network vendors use in their equipment, because ultimately, a lot of what these operators are going to use is dependent on the software that they have in their network. So there's a lot of influence that occurs all the way up and down the chain. And I'm not surprised to hear this announcement, but it's really interesting that Intel has done a very good job of having these continued announcements down the road saying, like, we're working with Ericsson more closely, we're working with Samsung more closely. So they're doing a good job of communicating what they're doing on 5G and working with the leaders in the industry to make it clear that Intel is a big player in the space and continues to be.
Yeah, I'm impressed with their support for telco workloads, Intel, and also I'm very impressed with what Intel is doing around confidential computing and silicon root of trust, and there are a lot of activities with extensions to support AI workloads, both models and underlying data. And we're going to see more and more of generative AI come into the mix within the telecommunications industry. And so I really like what I'm seeing, with fourth generation Xeon scalable processors and, the support for these different, sort of verticals and use cases and applications. But let's move to your second topic. You want to talk about Qualcomm, and they've hit a new speed record.
Yes. So this is one of those things that will continue to happen, I think, in perpetuity. But I'll say we have a new record. I believe the previous record was 7 gigabits per second on 4 carriers. And I think that might have even been a MediaTek record. But this is a Qualcomm record. They're doing 7.5 gigabits per second in sub-6 only on a standalone network with 4 channels of carrier aggregation on the latest Snapdragon X75 chipset using 1024 QAM, which is not a surprise, but pretty interesting. Obviously, 1024 QAM, you got to be pretty close to the cell site to achieve. So you're probably going to be looking at the cell site, maybe within 100 to 200 feet of it. But this would be a 300 megahertz of TDD spectrum. So this is probably going to be 2.5 gigahertz if you can get it. I don't actually think that T-Mobile has 300 megahertz, but you could probably combine 2.5 with some 3.5. But I don't think 3.5 is TDD. But nevertheless, they're able to pull off, as much as possible. This is their modem, their latest modem, which is 5G Advanced ready. And yeah, there's nothing really other than this modem was announced in March at MWC. So it's been about 5 months and the modem is already breaking records. But we'll see what happens down the road, because this modem also has 10 carrier millimeter wave aggregation. And I have a feeling that we might get some millimeter wave records, probably closer to maybe MWC Americas in Vegas.
even if you're standing on a cell tower holding your device and you're getting 7.5 gigabits per second in mid-band, even carrier aggregated, that's incredible,
Well,
right?
all I can tell you is I was just at the LA Convention Center at SIGGRAPH, which there's no 5G news for that, so I'm not covering it here. But I will be writing a piece that'll probably go out early next week. I was getting 1.6 gigabits per second on T-Mobile, no millimeter wave, inside that convention center with thousands of people.
That's crazy.
I was just like mind boggled because I wasn't actually getting that much on Verizon with ultra wideband. Problem with Verizon is I didn't have time to check if I was on millimeter wave or not.
Right.
But I was actually getting faster speeds on T-Mobile than I was on Verizon.
Crazy. That's crazy. Well, I love what Qualcomm is doing really to sort of drive the performance envelope here and, just in general with things like Open RAN and that sort of thing.
T-Mobile's network does 4 carrier aggregation. So
yeah. Yeah, impressive, very impressive. Well, let's hit my third and final topic, and this is pretty late breaking news. So Cisco continues to be on a buying spree. Boy, Chuck Robbins has a big fat checkbook there. But they've purchased a mobile core vendor, WG2, for $150 million. And so WG2 is working group 2. This is Telenor's spin out of a company that a business unit that they started all the way back in 2017. And so Cisco obviously is very focused on service provider, and it's basically a cloud native mobile core. And what Cisco plans to do is leverage its capabilities to deliver a programmable mobile core as a service to its customers. And this fits really well with Cisco's overall strategy. I mean, they already offer converged core, and they offer a private 5G as a service offering with various RAN vendors, pick your flavor. And so I think, $150 million to Cisco is sort of a drop in the bucket, right? And this really sort of strengthens what they're doing. And really the value here from, a network provider standpoint is having that mobile core. That's one of the reasons why HPE acquired Athonet, so that they could be competitive, with the likes of the Ciscos. And certainly HPE, they continue to lean heavily into GreenLake, their IT consumption services model, and offer, not only networking as a service, but, eventually they're going to have a pretty compelling 5G as a service solution. So I don't know if you caught this news. Again, it's late breaking, but any thoughts before we move to your third and final?
I did see the news, but I don't really have that much knowledge about WG2. I'm glad you picked it up because it was pretty late breaking. But yeah, I mean, I think Cisco has made it clear where they're trying to build their strengths. And this does seem like something that would be very complementary to what their current businesses are. But to your point, they have been on a acquisition spree, and this isn't a necessarily particularly big one as far as Cisco goes. But I do think it's probably a very good one in terms of just product fit.
Yeah, and I'll just finally mention that Cisco's recently announced a mobility services platform, something that I'm planning to dig into with some upcoming briefings with Cisco. So I may come back on a future podcast and talk about that. But so let's move to your third and final topic, and you want to talk about the SES and their completion of clearing of C-band spectrum.
Yeah, so SES is one of the world's leading satellite communications providers. And they are one of the companies, I think Inmarsat was the other one, that were utilizing a spectrum in the US that need to be cleared for C-band. And there was a early clearing incentive given to them if they were to clear their spectrum by December 2023, which is also the time when the B and C blocks of C-band are to be made available to the operators. And the bidders who won. So this is, the second phase, where the first phase occurred in 2021 when we saw that first deployment of spectrum, and now we're seeing the second phase occurring. And they were able to pack their spectrum more tightly and launch some satellites to enable that spectrum use. So they're repacking. So they launched 5 new satellites. They repacked all their C-band downlink into 200. So upper 200 megahertz of the C-band, which is what we knew about. And then they
Yeah.
made all the necessary equipment changes associated with incumbent Earth stations and gateways across the planet into the 3700 to 4 gigahertz band, which are not being used for satellite communications. And above that is where the feared FAA interference situation was.
Right.
And yeah, so it looks like they will get their $3 billion incentive payment. And yeah, it'll be paid probably in the fourth quarter of this year. And hopefully T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon will utilize that spectrum very soon thereafter. I don't know if Inmarsat has necessarily cleared their spectrum yet, but they say they will be ready by the December deadline as well. So it's good news for more spectrum, and we will see what maybe those higher bands have more chances of interfering with altimeters and things like that. But hopefully that situation's been resolved already, and whatever aircraft are not compliant will just not fly until they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of an update on the spectrum situation, and I think something that will improve the 5G experience for users down the road, and will hopefully allow for a more robust 5G experience in total as we move closer and closer to standalone.
There's always that gold rush for that prize Goldilocks mid-band spectrum, the great balance of propagation and performance. But good stuff, buddy. Well, hey, it's been another great podcast this week. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Whaletown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sog. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week. And don't forget to rate us and subscribe.